Hey guys, Becky here, FiveTwoBaker. Welcome back. This week we'll be working on this beautiful fluffy peony. I'm not sure what the name is, but it does have some smaller, fluffier center petals that form a bit of a sphere, and then it's hugged by big, beautiful outer petals. Now this flower does have a lot of petals, but hopefully that doesn't intimidate you because once you get the hang of making those center petals, it goes by very quickly. For this tutorial, you won't need any special cutters, and any generic rose or just a generic petal veiner will do just fine. So don't run out and get anything special, but let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is build up our center. Now the styrofoam center I'll be using is about 3.5 centimeters tall and 3 centimeters at its widest point. You can go ahead and make this out of gum paste or use styrofoam, your choice. I'll be using an 18 gauge wire as my carrier wire because this flower will have a lot of petals. I go ahead and hook it and then put it in through the thicker end of this teardrop styrofoam. I'll make sure it's adhered on there very well and then just set it off to dry. If you're going with gum paste, you won't use hot glue, you will just need some edible glue. Now for the center petals, we'll start by using some gum paste and we're going to roll it into a teardrop shape. The fatter end of the teardrop will be the part of the petal that we see. I go ahead and give it a little bit of a roll just to smash it out into shape just a bit, and then using some small embroidery scissors, I'm going to cut a few slits. How deep or how spread apart doesn't matter, each one will be a little bit different. Then using a rolling ball tool, I'll go ahead and just begin to form and stretch out the petal. I'm going for a longer, thin petal here. If I can't do it well enough with the rolling ball tool, then I just go ahead and use my rolling pin. Now this is about 6 centimeters in height. I go ahead and put it into my rose veiner and then I set it off to dry just for a few minutes. I don't want it to fully dry just yet. Here goes the entire process again. Each of my petals in the center will be a little bit different because they are freehand. Some will be a bit larger, others will be a bit smaller. I just want to make sure that I get them all around the same height so that I can form that beautiful sphere center. Now the height, because I'm doing this freehand, the easiest way for me to keep track of it is to see where it lands on my veiner. Once I know the height that I want, I just make sure that I reach the top of that veiner, and any extra flower paste that falls out of the veiner, I just go ahead and rip right off because the bottom of the petal no one is going to see anyway. So I just want to make sure I reach that height. How many slits, how wide it is not a great concern of mine. Once I have a few petals that are semi-dry, using a rolling ball tool, I go ahead on the ends, the top of the petals that you'll see, and I roll them out just a bit so that they have more of a cup curve and some movement to it. The next thing I'll do is sort of begin to roll up the bottom part of my petals a little bit like a taco so that there's some space when I'm putting these petals together. I don't want them flat against each other. I want there to be a bit of space, and so this little cone shape at the bottom helps that. Feel free to give some of your petals the cone shape and others none. Or go ahead and roll just a partial cone and leave part of your petal flat. Each one can be different. This doesn't have to follow any rigid pattern. Again, the most important thing at this point is that they're all about the same height. Once I'm all done with that, I go ahead and set them off to dry just a bit. I want to work with them while there's still some movement to them so that I can arrange them more easily. Here you see I've made about 40 to 50 of them. I use a flexible flower paste, so I'm able to make all of my petals at once and still have the movement. But if you're working with traditional gum paste, work a few at a time. It all is going to depend on how quickly your gum paste sets up. Once I'm ready, I go ahead and add edible glue to my center cone, and using some of the petals that I left flat, I'm going to cover up the center of my cone. I'm going to start off with my petals half on, half off. So about 3 centimeters will be glued onto the foam and 3 centimeters will be floating above, just freestanding. What I want to do here is make sure that none of my center cone can be seen because it's just white styrofoam. So I want to make sure to hug them all around the center nice and tight, just so that if you look into the flower, you don't see a center cone. When I'm placing the flowers, only the first few flowers that are covering the center are the ones that I really want to pay attention to how I place, because I want that center covered. All the petals after this, I want to be a little freer with the movement. I want to let the petals hang off to the side a little bit more. I want to work with the curves that they have, and I don't necessarily want them all facing in the same direction because I want there to be some movement. As I add more petals, the other thing I'll be doing is working my way down the cone to make sure that I'm following that spherical shape. Because each of my petals are a little bit different, this is almost like a game of Tetris, just seeing where they fit best and where they look good. So like this one here you see is at an angle, but it's going to be beautiful that way. I don't need them all standing up straight. The other thing that I'll be working on once I finish the first few center petals is doing sort of a triangle shape. At the end of this, I'll show you how it's not a sharp triangle. I'm not going to have pointed edges sticking out and it won't be obvious, but I like to keep the spherical shape while sort of going in a triangle pattern. For whatever reason, I find that shape is so much more pleasing to my eye than just going in a perfect circle. It seems to feel a bit more natural to me, so that's how I work. But of course, you can do whatever looks good to you. I definitely encourage you to just go with it and put the petals where it feels right to your eye. Now after a certain point, because my flower petals are still flexible and I'm doing it all at once without any breaks, I am going to turn my flower head upside down and work with it that way. I'll just occasionally flip it back up to make sure that I'm headed in the right direction as far as shape and placement goes, but I'll work upside down so that my petals don't flop over. If you're working with traditional gum paste, then this might be a bit easier for you because you'll only be working sections at a time. And here go my last few petals that I'm sticking on. Here goes a little freeze frame, and hopefully you can see that triangular shape that I'm referring to. It's not perfectly a circle, but I love how it looks. It looks a little more wild and free and natural to me. This is what I'm referring to when I say I work in a triangular shape. Now I'm going to make some sort of middle transition petals. These are going to be formed the exact same way those first center petals were, but these petals will be about twice as wide. Same height, just twice as wide. They're getting a little bit bigger now. Once they're out of the veiner, then I put them into a silicone egg mold, and I sort of pinch the center so that it has that egg mold shape more easily. I'll make about 6 or so of these to add around the bottom. While those petals are setting up, I'll also be making my largest petals. For these, because they're so large and they'll be more open, I want to have them wired, so I'm going to start off on this veining board so that I have that thick center. Here I have a generic little shape cutter. If you have a rose cutter, that would work well. If you have some peony cutters, you'll probably have a shape similar to this as well, but if not, you can get a free download that I'll link in the description. I want to make sure that the ends of my flower petals are nice and thin so that they look realistic. You go as thin as you're comfortable with. And then because this is a peony, I sort of add a few little random cuts and frilled edges to the end of it. And I do this just with my Dresden tool. You can use a little rotary tool cutter or an X-Acto knife, whatever you have on hand. Using a 28 gauge floral wire, I'm going to hook the end just a bit so that my petal doesn't roll around and doesn't get lost in the weight of it. I add some edible glue, take off the excess, and through that thicker center, I'll go ahead and thread my floral wire in just a bit, maybe about 1 centimeter or 2, pinch it to the floral wire, and then I'll go ahead and vein it. In case you're doing this freehand, this petal is again about the same 6 centimeter height, just a little bit longer, or a little bit taller, I should say. I'll go ahead and pinch the center just a bit to help get that round shape because I'm not folding the petals over themselves, and I want it to have that nice cup shape. Then I'll set it off to dry in a round silicone mold. Now, once my middle-sized petals are dry enough, I'll go ahead and just add some edible glue to the ends of them, and I'll stick them on so that they're cupping and sort of hugging those smaller center petals. I'll just evenly spread these out. Because of gravity, I do like to work upside down at this point, just to make sure that they have time to dry and don't fall off before they do. Now, you should wait for all your petals to be dry at this point. I did not. So I'll be working upside down as I add my final outer petals. I have a total of about 6 outer petals that I've made, and I'll just be, again, evenly spacing them out, adding them with some floral tape to my carrier wire, trying to keep as close to the base of my other petals as I possibly can. Once I have them all on there, then I wrap the floral wire around the base a few times just to make sure it's nice and snug on there, that nothing will come loose. And then I run my floral tape down the carrier wire at a 45-degree angle so that I can cover all of my wires. Now the only thing left to do is adjust those last outer petals. The other ones, because they are not wired, you can't really adjust them. But the wired petals you definitely can, so just move them around as open or as close as you would like your flower. If you'd like to also see how I make the calyx for the peonies, I have a video that I'll link above and in the description box down below so that you can complete your peony. And that's it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you liked it, please do give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. I would super appreciate that. If you have any questions or comments, please do drop them down below and I'll make sure to get back to you. If not, I will see you guys for the next tutorial.